I'm Ken Kessler, and I'm a freelance journalist. We have an unusual theme tonight because basically it's a pretty negative theme, and hi-fi shows... Well, yeah, exactly. I'm the industry Fabissina. And basically, hi-fi shows are about the joy and wonder of high-end audio. But the problem has been, with a precious few exceptions like Munich and Milan, most of these shows attract one kind of person. And if you look to the person to your right or left, you will see that kind of person. Unfortunately, there has been no new blood in this industry for years. Oh, thank you, Mike. And what we have is a theme of high-end audio has to rediscover its mojo. Now, the vantage point that we're working from is based on my experience outside of high-end audio, because most people within a given field tend to work only in that field, and it's very hard to detach yourself. If, for example, thank you, Roy, you're a dentist, it's hard to picture how the patient feels when they go under the drill, or it's even hard to imagine what a veterinarian thinks like. But for the past 15 years, I've been working in the extreme high-end luxury sector, which is where the millionaires are spending money like there's no tomorrow, despite what's happened since 2008. Ferrari has a waiting list. This morning, the Swiss watch industry reported a 12.7% growth in the last quarter. Last year, the Swiss watch industry posted a 16 to 27% growth across the board. If you want expensive French wines and you don't live in China, you're out of luck. All of the designer fashion houses, they can't make enough product. We are in the luxury sector, and we are dying. Now, there are individual brands that are doing well, but for the most part, every show I've been to this year, I don't know the numbers on this show, but every show I've been to this year, with the exception of Munich, the numbers have been down. There is no new blood, and the problem is the people with the money who are not audiophiles don't even know we exist. The tragedy is that most of them are baby boomers who love music. And Roy told me a horror story when I last saw him about a friend in New York who was putting together an apartment for $1 million, just the decorating. And the sound system he put in was a Bose Wave radio.
Because it replaces an entire rack of audio gear. Don't you watch television?
Exactly. Now, the question that we're putting to the panel is, how does high-end audio find its mojo again? Because in the 60s and 70s, if you opened up Esquire or Playboy and they showed a bachelor pad, there was a killer sound system in it. Now, there's an iPod dock. At the far end is Alan Surcom, one of my colleagues from the UK. He's the editor of Hi-Fi Plus, and he's been through the wars like most of us. Next to him, Peter McGrath represents Wilson Audio, a very high-end product, so that's from a retailer's viewpoint. Next is Kathy Gornik from THIEL, and Kathy has done more to fight for this industry with the people behind the CES than just about anyone to try to get us recognized as being other than the lepers that they stick in the Venetian. Mike Fremer has been promoting high-end audio for years, especially analog, but I think Mike will also admit that most of the audience are the converted. And Roy Hall is an importer of across the price range and a manufacturer, and he has to deal with retailers of all stripes as well. What I'd like to put to each one of them is what they think is missing or what can be done to make the world outside of you know that we even exist, and why they would want to buy high-end audio after they've made the final payment on their Ferraris. Start, Alan.
Hi. One of the reasons I've come on this panel is that in the UK there's a trade organisation that's started up. There used to be an organisation called the British Audio Dealers Association. That has changed now. It's now known as Clarity, the Clarity Alliance, which is an organisation of manufacturers, dealers, associated trades, the press, And we're struggling because we're struggling to get get enough people to even recognize we're starting. But one of the reasons I started this is Ken's got his horror story. Mine was getting in the back of a taxi. And usually when you were a journalist in the audio business, you get talking to the cabbie and they say, oh, what do you do? And you say, I work in audio. And it's a bit like saying, the doctor is in. Because from there on in, they say, oh, great, I've got this, I've got that, I've got this. And this guy just said, oh, do they still make that? And that is the problem. We are not getting the message across. Now, we have to start a grassroots campaign because essentially one of the problems is that half the guys on the planet don't know we exist because this little baby covers everything that they need. This is a camera, this is their audio system, this is their video, this is everything that they need. And increasingly, we're competing against this. And I think in some respects, what we have to do is not compete against it. We have to, our dealers and our magazines and ourselves, everyone in the press has basically ignored the existence of the iPod until it got too late. By the time it got round to it, and by the time we were looking at this, it was too little too late. Now for here, we're preaching to the crowd. We're preaching to the converted. Very few of you guys are ever going to seriously listen to music on an iPod. But to 90% of the people out there in the world, an iPod or some other method of it, or an iPhone, is the way that they listen to music. And if some guy walks into a dealer's or sees something and they just say, oh, well, that's rubbish, sir. Or that's the kind of thing, yeah, okay, why would you listen to that? You want to listen to good stuff. They're going to walk out. So we have to start to re-educate people from an early stage. Now, an iPod is great. It's an absolutely fine thing to listen to. It's not going to be the best thing in the world, but you're never going to get the guys going from good to better to best if we hack them off at good. And that's my take on it. So, sorry, are we going to hold questions?
We'll have a whole Q&A till the end.
Okay.
So, Peter, yeah?
I have a background that traverses three different elements. The first, having been a retailer for 26 years before I joined the dark side and became involved with manufacture, for which I have nothing but the highest level of love and respect. And I've also, throughout that whole process, been involved as a classical music recording engineer. So I have a number of different perspectives on the issue, and indeed the issue is right there? Great. The issue is, where do we get our audience? How do we do it? And when I started in high-end audio back in the early 70s, the field wasn't even recognized. I was kind of like a pioneer. I had a store in Coral Gables, Florida, and when people would stumble into my store, they would see these things and they thought they'd landed on Mars. But what was interesting back then, and I'm not so sure that the challenge has really changed all that much. What was interesting back then, what I did and my staff did, was we basically made it our business to create an experience. Now, admittedly, we did not have the distraction of computers, iPads, iPhones, etc. But we did have warm bodies coming in the door. And once we had that happening, then we could, if we did our job right, work diligently to create an experience. And usually that experience was making them be exposed to something that had never existed in their mind before. And then one thing would lead to another, and you'd build these people from ground up. As kind of an anecdote in terms of where our successful dealers are, it's still, with all of the reviews that we've gotten at Wilson Audio, with all of the hard work we've done to market and promote our product, still, the statistics are that 7 or 8 out of every 10 people who buy their first Wilson speaker had never heard of the brand before they walked in the store. So they're not audiophiles. They're people for whom our dealers diligently created the experience. The real challenge, though, is that how do we break them away from the expectation of an iPod and get them in front of a component or a set of components and into a room? And then, equally important, how do we have a salesperson who knows how to communicate the passion of what the music is all about to them? And that is a big problem, and that I see as perhaps one of our biggest challenges in our industry, is because I hate to say it, but I think most of our salespeople are musically illiterate. I'm sorry to say that, but it is true. And I don't mean my world, which is classical. I mean a vast spectrum of musical literacy. How many salesmen, you know, we all know Diana Krall. I also refer to affectionately as Diana makes my skin crawl. But how many people, sorry. No, but how about a Ray LaMontagne? Or how about some of the great independent music? All of the stuff that's out there. We're living in a world, probably the best time ever in the history of recorded music in terms of the things that we can select and play and demonstrate with. And yet, most of the sales staff, I mean, they're always asking me, Peter, put together a CD of all your best tracks. That's your job, damn it. I'm sorry. But I have a real difficult time doing their work for them, because then it becomes a prescription that they have no investment of passion or intellect in, and it goes nowhere. Then that I'm sorry, I'm rambling on. So very simply, we need to get customers into the store. Once they can get into a store that's well set up, I think we have a good shot at it. And I do believe that high-end music or high-end audio is far from dead. It is not trending in a good way on many levels, but on other levels, it is. But we've just got to figure out how to widen the scope of what we do. An alliance with lifestyle luxury goods is one level of possibility. But I want to tell one other anecdote, because, Alan, you mentioned getting them started early. In this room, I think I saw them come in, Tam and Chris. They have done something that is rather unique. And a show of hands of how many people are involved in this because you were fortunate enough to have a transcendental music listening experience on a hi-fi system. How many people had that happen to them? At a young age. At a young age. Yeah, at school. Right. I am that way too. The problem is nobody is making that available to young people. Now, what my friend Tam, Professor Dr. Carlson, and his wife Chris, they built this listening library at their university, at the University of the South in Swanee, Tennessee. It is a magnificent place, the sole purpose of which is bringing students in. They don't even have to be in the music department, and setting them down in front of an incredible stereo system, truly state-of-the-art. They have a 30,000 LP collection, 22,000 CDs, principally classical, all given to them by a wonderful benefactor who was a former teacher there. And they're carrying on the tradition that this benefactor did when he was a teacher there, who brought students into his home every night, 3 times a week, and exposed them to music. And they're doing the same thing to these young, fresh, intelligent minds in a university community. When I explained this project to Dave Wilson, he got tears in his eyes and he said that happened to him at university. All of us have had that experience. And we've got to find ways to maybe expand that experience, perhaps outside of the context of a retail store. Or at least, God forbid, if we don't do it in a retail store, where will it happen? Enough.
Kathy?
Is everybody happy?
Okay. I'm afraid my comments aren't going to be nearly that astute. My company, I founded it with Jim THIEL in the late 70s, and actually Peter was one of the premier dealers at the time, and we were very proud for a long time that he sold our product in his store. And in a way, what Peter did was representative of a lot of what was going on across the country then. A lot of entrepreneurial spirit in terms of starting businesses around the passion of high-end audio. So when we came out with our first speaker, we had a ready-made distribution channel and a ready-made customer base. So it really wasn't all that hard. I mean, we had to make a great product for sure, and that's one thing that I would like to note more on a cultural phenomenon base, that existed, and it sort of bubbled up from the bottom. There was no great big marketing campaign by some major company that got that kind of passion going. It was a true cultural phenomenon. So at that time, everything was product and performance based, and the dealers could not wait for you to come out with a new product, and it didn't matter if they had ever heard of you before. And if the right guy liked you, like a Peter, he could be extraordinarily influential with all of the other key players, and boom, you were in and you were selling.
Bribes help.
And I have to say a nod to the press, because the incredible people that started the magazines and their commitment to the sound and to the care and feeding of music, was hand in glove with this wonderful, wonderful period that we all truly enjoyed. Well, somewhere around the early 90s, things began to change, and the dealer and the distributor, I'm just going to not describe it in great detail, but the shift went from product and performance to the dealer and the distributor. They essentially were the brand, and that was all fine with me. However, because, there were so many forces, and I'm not smart enough to analyze what all the forces were. But, we went from 2-channel to multi-channel. There was a lot of architectural, the integration, make it disappear kind of philosophy. And of course, dealers and distributors, you have to play to where the customers are. So in that context, quality audio really suffered, because it's very hard to make an in-wall speaker do what a freestanding loudspeaker can do, much like it would be to have a great singer or pianist or performance be shoved back into a wall. They're much better listening to when they're out in free space. So now I'm seeing a shift that is more customer and client centric. The whole phenomenon of the dealer being the brand, it might still be there, but now customers and trying to customize what they want seem to be driving the motivation. So in all of this, I guess I don't, I'm not educated like Peter on music. I guess my view of the consumption of music and the appreciation of it, it may not be intellectually there, say, in an academic sense, but I happen to think that music is extremely important to so many people in this culture, and I don't know that they're uneducated. I guess I would not have that opinion, maybe I don't know, but there's a young man who works for me, Gary Dayton, who happens to be here in the audience, and he is just a phenomenal consumer of music. He's 30, just turned 30, and has an unbelievable appreciation for the widest range of music. And I don't know that he could be academically literate like somebody who is trained, but I have a great appreciation for his love and appreciation of music. So now here we are. We have all these great companies. We have great recordings. We have great press. We have great companies. And the sound here is just so moving to me. It still never ceases to totally affect me. So I ask myself, what can we do? And I am not one to object ever to customers. Customers lead us. We do not lead customers. So it's our job, somehow, some way, to bring the essence of what it is we do in some kind of delivery mechanism or packaging or whatever. There has to be some kind of innovation that we bring so that we can expand the pie of people who are interested. And frankly, I think the pie is much larger if we had a way that we could figure out how to make it fit in with their lifestyles. If I were that smart, I would not be here. I would be very rich indeed. But I totally believe in that quality never, ever goes out of style. We have quality. We just haven't figured out what that magic formula is to bring it to the customers who really are the ones we are here to serve.
Mike?
Well, first of all, I find a lot of this discussion reminds me of when I hear people on television saying, you know what, we don't have a Leave It to Beaver world anymore where the husband gets home and guess what, Leave It to Beaver was a television show. The 50s was never like Leave It to Beaver except on television. When I was in college, There were 2 kids on the dorm floor of 52 kids who had a hi-fi that we call a hi-fi. Everybody else had a flip-down Sears Roebuck changer. Remember those things? That was the iPod of that
You
era.
went to a very poor university.
I was at Cornell, so it was kids had plenty of money. I went to Cornell, believe it or not, yeah, and they didn't kick me out, and I didn't flunk out. So, to a great degree, I think we're talking about a world that never really existed. This was always a kind of small thing. When I went to my first hi-fi show in New York at the Penn Plaza Hotel in, I guess, the mid-'60s, when Henry Klaas was demonstrating his reel-to-reel tape recorder, the audience looked like this, except for me, and maybe 5 other people. I mean, that's what it is. When I go to classical music, people say, oh, the people are really getting old. What's going to happen when they die off? There'll be no one left. Guess what? There'll be more older people that will go listen to the classical music. So I don't think it's as bad as people think it is. The one problem we do have is that the journalists, the mainstream journalists who used to kind of cover audio, but I mean, the best there was Hans von Tell, who wasn't allowed to review anything that cost more than a couple $100, $500, but at least he was there covering it. That entire thing is now covered by computer geeks. That's our biggest problem with getting to mainstream media. But that's not really what our problem is. You were talking about a delivery system to get to young people. How many people here have been to a used record store? Who's in that store buying records? I don't know what you see. I was in New Orleans a couple weeks ago. I was the oldest person in there. It was
You're the oldest
all
person here, Mike.
Kids. I probably am. But I don't look at that's what's important. So they were all kids, and they were buying records and with an enthusiasm and an excitement that's unbelievable. And that is so unlikely a thing, but it's spreading virally the way MP3 spread. And when one kid goes to a friend's house and he says, listen to this, they go, wow. So those are the kids that we have to get. Those are the people we have to get, among others, I think. But that's a delivery system that works. How? Also, bring your iPod to the hi-fi store day, is a good thing. Whereas I was one time at a store in New York, I won't mention the store owner's name, Andy Singer, and I walked in there, and he actually threw us out of the store because you had an iPod on the cover. I don't sell iPods. Get out of my store. When actually, if he would only have invited those kids in to play their iPod in the store, they would hear what we all hear. So I'm very optimistic about this. I think we might have lost one generation who got involved in MP3 downloading, but now I think there's another generation that recognized quality and that they were being given junk, and they want better, and they're telling their friends about it, and that is spreading. It's small. This is never going to be a huge thing. The day that you can wear your hi-fi around your wrist will sell as many hi-fis as these wealthy people that walk around with their watch. What time is it? That's a whole different thing. We'll never get those people.
Yeah. Before we hand over to Roy, there's one thing I'd like to interject. I know it doesn't look that way, but I'm actually younger than Mike. And when I was at university, and I won't embarrass anyone who went to this particular university, but it was a state university and not one of the expensive ones. But I started in 1970, and there wasn't a room in my dorm without a real hi-fi. Because by 1970, Tech Hi-Fi, I believe it was, and these others. And that was the generation that created the boom in hi-fi, because Michael was right. In the 50s and 60s, the only people who had high-end hi-fi were doctors, lawyers, and so on and so forth, graybeards and classical. If you look, it was even worse in the UK. In the US, we had this thing, they call them either lawyers or dentists systems, and that meant Macintosh and Fisher. In the UK, it was quad. And in the UK, it wasn't even jazz, it was only classical. That generation made way for the baby boomers, so by, I'd say, around 65 to about 80, every kid at university had, even if it was just what was the 17, the KLH, what was the system with the fold-out speakers? Yeah, they had something like that instead of a little record player. On my floor alone, there must have been 30 pairs of Dynaco A25s. And those people who stuck with it are us. But, as Michael pointed out, everyone's pointing out, there is a lost generation. Now, Roy, I'd like to hand over to Roy next, because Roy, in addition to selling high-end stuff, has entry-level turntables, which are targeted at these kids. Roy?
Hi.
There's a dead mic kicking around.
Is this working? No. It works. This one working?
Yeah, that's
fine. Firstly, I've also been kicked out of Andy's store, and I'm friendly with him. And he's kicked me out more than once. When I was first asked to join this panel, I called up a few people I knew to ask their opinions, and I called up my nemesis, Sam Tellig from Stereophile, and I'm quoting him, or, paraphrasing him. He said, "Fuck them, they don't deserve it." And as always, I don't agree with what Sam says. I actually have a different experience. I understand what these guys are going through and what's happening, but I'm doing incredibly well, partially because of Michael Fremer, who's changed the whole analog world. But we sell turntables, and we sell turntables. I mean, they are inexpensive turntables, but we sell them in Urban Outfitters. We sell them in clothing stores in the Lower East Side in Manhattan. We are beginning to reach non-traditional methods of distribution. Now, I doubt if you could do it with a THIEL speaker, and I know you can't do it with the most incredible. Have you seen these new amplifiers? Just amazing. Dan's amplifier. I doubt if you could do it with that, but you can do it with inexpensive, and kids are really into vinyl now in a big way. It took a long time to come to America. It started in Europe about 10, 12 years ago, and we are just finding that our turntable sales are zooming, and I know my competition sales are zooming also. It's not just me. But I think part of the solution is finding non-traditional avenues of selling. There is a problem for true high-end audio. There's very few really high-end audio dealers left. It's been replaced by mail-order companies. And people can't listen to stuff. They can't audition. They can't have the experience. And that also, the more mail-order companies, the more it affects retailers because they think they'll get a better price. It's a complex thing. But I see an enormous future for high-end audio, but maybe that's only at my neck of the woods. I'm in the entry-level high-end audio.
But when they get older and have more money, they'll want to move up?
Hopefully they'll move up. So I think you guys should pay me some money in advance. Because I'm doing you a service.
I didn't ask for any money.
Dan?
I guess I have a couple different takes on it. I mean, I think the iPod has caused people to immerse themselves in music, which is something we did. I mean, I grew up in the late 50s, early 60s. You immersed yourself in music because it was the only outlet you had to really hear music. You went to a store, or you were lucky enough that your dad had a system, and you bought records, and you immersed yourself in music. You listened to music 24/7 if you could do it. But these kids have what we didn't have. They have a device that they can listen for 24/7. They're immersing themselves in the music. They're not abandoning music. They are getting more and more and more exposed to the music that they like to listen to, and they listen to it constantly. If you watch them work, if you go anywhere where kids are working, stocking shelves or doing anything, they're listening to their iPod while they're doing it. They never stop. But I mean, the effectiveness of this, I'm going to say one word, which is going to make me gag a little bit, but think about the Beats headphone. Think about the immersion that caused that to happen, that caused them to take an earbud, which is a superior product, but buy another product that cost a lot more money and put it on their head. Get on a subway in New York, get on a train. Everybody's got one of those pairs of headphones on. So it's not unreachable that we could come up with a scenario where they may actually want to listen to the music the way it was supposed to be listened to, recorded, and immerse themselves in. But what's the vehicle for it? I don't have that answer right now.
Now, before we turn it over to a question and answer, there are a couple of aspects of this I'd like to point out that are much broader. One of the things that's been pointed out, as Dan said, all of them have said, kids today are immersed in the music. For all we know, they're spending more time listening to it than we did. But the fact remains is that one element has been thrown out completely, and that is sound quality. Absolutely no concern for it whatsoever. My son is 22, 24/7 music. He almost committed suicide when I couldn't get him tickets for Glastonbury. There's probably $500,000 worth of hi-fi equipment in my house, and he listens to an iPod.
Because his daddy listens to a good hi-fi.
I told him he's going to inherit it, and he says, no, it's going on eBay. So when I die, guys, you check eBay. The minute you see my obituary, there's 12,000 LPs that are not going to be loved in my home. Okay. Well, Michael, you're the executor, because he's going to outlive me.
Spiting you. He'll
I hope so. Well, he likes watches now. Anyway, so that's part of the problem. The whole quality thing was thrown out, and Kathy might be able to back me up on this. For the last 25 years, there has been a drive against large hi-fi systems, and I don't want to say it's a problem with the wives, because I always get crucified for saying that. And other Jews have been crucified, so I don't want to follow that tradition. But the downsizing, which we can also blame on Bose, has led to a reduction in quality because the laws of physics say that a speaker this big cannot sound like a speaker that big. And architects, because we've all had run-ins with architects and interior decorators because of the whole install thing, and these guys hate big stuff. And I'll tell you one little horror story that goes along with Roy's horror story about a guy with $1 million makeover who buys a Bose Wave. One of the most important jewelers in London, he's got a $35 million house, and he's wanted to spend $1 million on a hi-fi. He's a music lover. And he's got Alexandrias, he's got a couple of stacks of Krell, and he buys a pair of anniversary Sonus Faber Amatis in blonde wood. And when he turned his head, his decorator painted them. Fact. This one I will name. Vince Clarke, rock musician, he was in Yazoo, a bunch of other bands, bought a pair of Sonus Faber, what was the Extrema, the Extrema. Aged Italian walnut, hand finished, spray painted them silver. So that's his prerogative. So it's a weird world out there, but the reason I point those out is that these are the people who are not audiophiles, but who can afford the stuff, and that's what they do with them. The bottom line is not what they do with them. The bottom line for me is I don't want to see this industry die because of a lack of customers for we are living at a time where there's never been better sound. Yes, I love my Quad 57s, but I have to say I have a museum of hi-fi equipment, and nothing I can put together from the 50s would sound as good as Dan's amps through a pair of XLFs with an SME turntable in front of it. I'm sorry. As much as we all want to wallow in nostalgia, the stuff today is phenomenal. Thank you, Mike. Because all of us love our retro, but trust me, a Thorens 124 does not blow away a Continuum. End of. Anyway, think of all of these things as you throw questions out to these people about what you might think we've got to do as the industry end of it to spread this beyond our little world. And I'll leave you with one more thought before I throw it out. The reason why the other luxury industries are all increasing in sales are various psychological reasons. Now, a lot of it's territorial. The Chinese market of new millionaires are very, very much brand-oriented, imported brands. So even if there were phenomenal products made in China, and I believe this applies to Japan as well, they want imports because of a prestige thing. There's a prestige thing that people like to say in London, there's a specific dealer where people want to go to buy their BMW, even if they've got one in their hometown. These are variables that enter the realm of psychology about what is appealing. But a typical audiophile would say, well, that's not the right reason. You should only be talking about sound quality. This is the attitude that has made our appeal so narrow. Now, the thing that I compare to, whenever anyone says to me, you can wear your watch outside, you can wear your haute couture outside, and people see your car if prestige matters to you, but they have to come to your house to see your hi-fi. Well, I can tell you right now, there's waiting lists for Sub-Zero and Viking, and the people buying that stuff don't even cook. I can go to the Financial Times, which has a color magazine every month called How to Spend It. It is it makes the Robb Report look like a local newspaper. If you say Sub-Zero has a new fridge, that editor is all over you like a rash. If you say hi-fi, she's going to say, oh, Bose has a new product. And she's the most powerful luxury journalist in the UK. Now, questions, please. Yes, sir.
I was going to start with. I have two things. One is on
Sorry, is this directed to one of the individuals per se?
Oh, you know it, maybe
No,
just
I
stand up.
was going to make 2 points.
Yeah.
Do I have to go?
Yeah, if you could stand up so the people can hear you.
2 points. One is on the age thing. I think the younger crowds, first of all, as you get older, you can afford more, and that's the big thing. Is it's not just the people who have the Ferraris, the young kids who have the Ferrari. That's the 1%. The larger group, need to get up to 40 and 50 before you can afford, and some of the kids are out of the house, and all of a sudden you can open up a listing room. So I think that's the first thing. Also with the kids, they travel around a lot, which we didn't do. We got a job, and we thought we were going to hold that job forever until you buy a stereo, you fill your house full of stuff, and you were going to sit. The kids today, their mindset is, this job is 1.2 years, 1 year, 3 months, and then I'm moving to another city. And so they're not going to collect these big things to carry around. My second point is that, for me, I forget which person said it, but it was, I got out of high school in the afternoon, and I started walking home, and I went by the Sandwell in Berkeley, and they had all this Mac and all this equipment, and I was like, I walk a little further, and there's Pacific Stereo with a row of Kenwood 4-channel stuff and all this stuff, and I go in there for half an hour. Our kids just aren't exposed. We have to somehow expose them to the real goods. You got to see this stuff to get excited about it, and I think that's what we're missing. Is I don't know the right answer. You can't put 100,000 stores up, but that's what it was. Is all of us grew up walking by these stores and lusting after these products and spinning the Moran style around and around and around. And that's what we grew up with, and that's what the lust was developed.
Mm. But one point about that, there are two different areas we're talking about increasing, and you've just dealt with the new blood. But more importantly, relative to this, was the people who can afford it. And I agree. I mean, when I was 16 and bought my first hi-fi, I did it. I had to take out a loan from the hi-fi store, and it took me 2 years. And it was a receiver and a turntable and speakers. It was a lot of money for a 17-year-old, 16-year-old. But I'm thinking, when I proposed this to the panel, I was thinking more of the people who can afford this, would appreciate it. That's crucial. Not just buying something because it's expensive, like the couple with the Sub-Zero and the Viking who don't actually use it, or someone with a yacht that they're never going to actually take out of port.
Okay. I'll throw it back to you and
Sure.
say, where did they learn about the Viking? Wherever they learned about the Viking.
That is the key point, and it's about what I have been indicting this industry for, is we do not know how to reach these people. And I don't mean because we're stupid. Part of it is it takes money. And there are maybe 3, 4 companies in this entire industry that have the wealth to do it, and they're not high-end.
There were food magazines, because everybody eats, and the food magazines were the venue where Viking and Sub-Zero decided, well, let's put our kitchens in there, and let's put our kitchens on television when there's a segment about cooking. That's how that whole thing began spinning around. Yeah. We don't do that.
Well, unfortunately, the music magazines don't do that.
Music magazines, such that there are, don't have advertisements for our products. They have advertisements for computer products. And that's another problem that I don't know how you solve that, because it's expensive. Unless everybody gets together in this industry and says, we'll do a cooperative advertisement, and we'll put an ad in there that we can all afford that will talk about our industry. But then everybody fights about whose product's going to be in the ad. Then there's a lot of hair pulling, and then everybody hates everybody, and you don't get that done. But that's what has to be done.
Gentleman in the back in the Navy.
Yeah, you talk about lost generation. Those are your future hi-fi customers, and exposing them. My concern is a little bit, right of center, which is the quality of recordings today. While we have incredible technology to have wonderful recordings, now that people can take on their bus, in their garage, even really high-name pop bands, they're recording using garbage, and this is what kids are listening to. So even when you take so much of the popular music and you put it on a great system, they don't experience the same magic that we did when we took Steely Dan and put it on the turntable. I think one of the challenges you all have, that we all have, is to find ways to get recording artists to be concerned about being centered.
Alan?
Yeah, I quite agree. Now I don't have to shout. Yeah, I do quite agree. I've done a seminar here today about the Loudness Wars, and it is a problem that the difficulty in some respects is that we are a small specialist community. The A&R men, the producers, the musicians involved in this are not going to back down, because no A&R man is going to turn it down when the last biggest hit of the last decade was I Got a Feeling with a dynamic range of about 3 decibels. Now, if that's the case, we're going to struggle. People are making them cutting recordings louder and more compressed to make them punch through. When it used to happen on radio, it's now gone ahead, it's gone into recordings. It's a big issue. Fortunately, it seems that people are starting to pull back from the brink. And one of the great advantages with this, and I'm not just blowing smoke up Mikey Fremer, but one of the great advantages is due to vinyl, because you can't do this on vinyl because the tracks collapse. So you have to pull back and you have to give a little bit more dynamic range. You have to back off the loudness. And that is part of the reason why kids are getting this. It's part of the reason why there's a whole hipster thing going on, listening to vinyl, because the stuff sounds better. And that is slowly starting to permeate through the music business. It's taking a time because there are still A&R men going, I'm not pressing that button. But it's slowly pulling back. The era of everything louder than everything else is starting to come to an end.
The artists are demanding it too. Yeah. I mean, Ray LaMontagne has beautifully recorded records. Andrew Bird has beautifully recorded records. Even Foo Fighters did their last thing all analog. They compressed it a little bit. But there are great artists out there, young people who are making really great sounding recordings, and mostly it's indie rock. It's not the stuff that's top 40. That stuff is always going to be compressed and junky. But below that, the college kids, the more sophisticated kids are listening to this other music that is well recorded and sounds great. And those are the people we have to reach. And those are the ones that are buying the records, and that's where this whole cycle has to...
I feel that there's another component. It's not just the bad recordings that are made with a lot of compression, but it harkens back to another point that I made when I was speaking earlier, which is the illiteracy of the presenter in the store. Because, again, I work with salesmen all over the country and many in Europe, and frankly, few, if any, but by the way, 30 is the rage. People in their late 20s, early 30s, I'm starting to see some salesmen that are really into it. But the vast majority of the salesmen play the dreck. That does not allow the potential customer to have an experience that truly transcends what they have on a routine basis via their earbuds. And it's not a digital versus analog issue. It's really about what's going on in the head of the presenter. Does he know what type of buttons to push? Does he know what recordings that are out there? Yes, play the thing that the young guy or the older guy came in and wanted to hear, or the gal that they wanted to hear. But then know what arrows to pull out of their quiver to create that experience. It is absolutely essential for that transcendent experience. And very few salesmen around the country have that capability. They don't drive the bus. They let the passenger take them on the route that will get them nowhere.
2 points about that, about the sound quality of the recordings vis-a-vis high-end and the music itself. If you follow a chart of the sales of hi-fi, this is not about recording quality, but about music quality. The biggest booms in hi-fi were when the music charts were phenomenal. The biggest boom of all was the 60s, when we had the Beatles, the Beach Boys, and the Supremes in the top 3. And the dips were, the biggest dip was around the time of rap and hip-hop. But, and we should all maintain this, that we all know, and some of my favorite music is really badly recorded, R&B in the late 50s, but it sounds better on a good system. We mustn't forget that. So however, whatever you think of the sound quality of the latest recordings, they're gonna sound better on a better system. Sir, in the brown jacket?
Yeah, isn't it really about identifying the market and trying to meet this customer on their own terms? How do you find what those terms are? I think Roy identified that there's already a market of a certain generation that's starting to get very interested in the turntable, in the vinyl. How do you sort of want to expand on that? I mean, that's an experiment that's starting to work. You want to jump on what's working and expand on it.
But that's exactly right. Because if you polled everybody in this room, there's not one person in this room that hasn't bought something on Amazon. The vehicle for buying has had a shift because even people buy audio equipment, believe it or not, on Amazon. The reason they do it, it's instant gratification. It's 20 to 30% less than the dealer's willing to sell it to them. If they don't like it, they're sending it back. I mean, this is what we're really combating. To your point, yes, Royce found another vehicle in some other stores that are willing to play and get involved in this business. But why would somebody that's a major merchant want to take on some of the other stuff that we're doing when they're competing with the internet constantly? And why, if you're a manufacturer in this business, would you allow your product to be sold on Amazon, which is eroding the whole base of the marketplace that you're trying to exist in? I mean, these are the questions that we have to address before we can get our business to be healthy. Do all the dealers have to go out of business and everybody that likes audio buy on Amazon and be unsatisfied, and then all of a sudden audio stores will reopen again and everybody says, wow, these guys really did have a place in the world? I mean, this is what we're faced with.
You know, we sell a ton of stuff on Amazon, and our dealers sell it, the ones that have brick and mortar stores, and they're making money, and they're connecting with new people who are interested in buying audio equipment and music lovers. It's not about trying to, you know, either going to buy out the rules about it. It actually is about how people.
Just one thing.
Sorry, Roy.
Just one thing to amplify what Leland's saying. We control prices. And so our stuff is sold on Amazon, but it's sold at the full retail price. Amazon, for us, is not a vehicle for discounting. Now, the reason we don't allow discounting is we could sell a lot more if we allowed it, but it devalues your product. And that's very important to us, that we keep the value of our product. And so we're very, very tough, and we do cut off dealers who discount. So if you buy one of our products on Amazon, you're going to pay within $2 for the regular
And
retail
leaving price aside, and every type of commodity that you can purchase has different unique issues. For example, if you sell cameras, you make nothing on the body, you make the money on the lens, that kind of thing. Hi-Fi had a problem unique to it, in that unlike anything else you will buy, if you're putting together a system, the odds are you have to deal with 2 or more manufacturers. You buy a car, the tires are already on it. You buy a suit, it's complete. So this automatically made it difficult for the consumer who has even the slightest lack of confidence in putting together a system, which is why the retailers and the reviewers exist. That's item number 1. Number 2, and this is talking about something closing the gate after the horse is bolted. The one thing that we never had, with very few exceptions, like I never saw Chris Hansen's store or the guy Bobby in Washington, but I've been in more watch stores and high-end car dealerships than I care to admit. I have never been into a Mercedes dealership and seen a slob in jeans, dirty coffee cups, and attitude. And yet, their car costs the same as the pair of speakers that some slob is trying to sell you. I have never gone into Cellini or Tourneau, any watch store, and seen a dirty coffee cup, or last month's trade magazines, and a bunch of attitude. The worst case scenario ever was in the UK in the 80s. If you went into any high-end store, they tried to sell you a turntable, even if you were going in to buy an amp, and it had to be a Lin. And that damaged, Alan, do you agree? Yes. You lived through it. Could have given, and
there's only one. No, this one works. Yeah, as I said, with my my Clarity Alliance hat on, one of the things that I've said to dealers is, guys, you do not wear your breakfast when you're dealing with a client. And I've seen people who've turned up looking like slobs, looking like, this is stuff where,
they look homeless.
They ask who the rivals are. I've said to people, who are your rivals? And they'll always point out, oh, that audio dealer there, that's 150 miles away. That guy there online, this guy there. No, man, if you're selling expensive equipment, your rivals are Gucci, Mercedes, Audi, Rolex, all these companies that you are, and if you go into any of these dealerships, They are pristine. They know what they're doing. And that's one of the problems. Don't wear your breakfast. But yeah, Ken's absolutely right. Back in the, and I was working in one of the UK's kind of foremost flat earth, as we called it, Lynn name dealerships. And you had a choice of Lynn, turntable, or leave. And that was it. And there wasn't a choice. And if you walked in and said, I want a CD player, you had a choice of a Lynn turntable or leave. They had a CD player, but you weren't allowed to play it.
Brett?
I'm a little younger than some of you guys.
Let's rub it in.
But I'm also a second generation audiophile. And I was born into this industry. And I also now have a 16-year-old child. And Michael Fremer really brings up the quintessential problem with what we're doing as an industry. And to your point, Ken, actually, as a counterpoint to what you're saying, generationally, I think that what happens is if I try to tell my 16-year-old that this is the right thing to listen to, what is he going to do, guys? He's going to do something else.
Yeah.
So how do you expose a younger generation to a work ethic and a culture and a thing that really your generation created for the market? And I agree with you philosophically, but when you go into that used record store that Michael Fremer is referring to, that guy, they won't give the time of day to that guy.
Mm.
So it's a very funny paradigm, because if the guys that like vinyl, I think what they're really striving for is a reaction to the music that's being produced today. They have a new library of music where, to Mr. McGrath's point, they are trying to educate themselves about the roots of the stuff that they like, what their parents or grandparents might have liked, why they liked it. And then they are exploring from that point. You know, my son is a big Kinks fan now all of a sudden, you know, and old school Kinks.
Excellent.
You know, and the only people in his school maybe that thinks that cool are the lunch ladies. Thinks it's great when he has his Kinks shirt on and he's 16. But the point is that we're all saying the same thing, that we're having a hard time. But to Michael's point, we do have to step back as an industry. I want to sell amplifiers. He wants to sell speakers, and everybody wants to do that. Of course we do. We do have to unify in a way to say to the record store owner that he has to get to the point of showing these kids that there's a reason why the word hi-fi came to be. And not only is it better than your iPod and more interesting, and you have another plethora of new experiences that are in front of you, but you have to make it so they're not, this is a stuffy industry. I mean, it's really been for a very long time. And it did start from the hi-fi days where it was the cigar-smoking lawyer that could afford it. And the 60s and the 70s occurred, and there were hippies, and now everybody wanted to get stoned and listen to their hi-fi, which was cool. Right?
It all sounded great then, huh? Even Bose.
There was a lot of music.
Yeah.
There was
a lot of brass.
There was a lot going on culturally, a lot more. So now we're competing with, video games, and we're competing with media and things. We talk about discretionary income. If any of us have kids, they spend inordinate amounts of money on video games. I mean, serious dollars. And when they are interested in music, I mean, I've got a $100,000 system in my house, and I have kids that come in and out of my house all the time. And they're all range from, 10 years old to 18. And of those kids, 20 that come through, 2 ask about the weird-looking Wilson audio speakers that you have in your living room and are interested in what we're doing. But they all enjoy their iPod. They all have their music. And they it's the disconnect where if you tell them that this is a thing they need to learn, they're going to walk away. Yeah. If we can consolidate as an industry to say, we embrace what you're doing, your recordings suck, guys, but we're not going to say that to them because that's the wrong thing to say.
You
know,
get the
you
two
don't
out of-
listen.
you get the 2 out of 10, you're doing okay.
Right,
That's two that
that's
come in.
right, that's 2 out of 10, it's
That's
not
all you
bad.
need.
So,
This gentleman had a question. Yeah, one of the frustrations that, oh, sorry.
Bloody audiophiles.
TV has light on it, so it's triggered. Stand on one leg. One of the frustrations that I have is that there's a proliferation of high-resolution audio interfaces out there that allow people to record very high-resolution content. You know, at any one time, you know, there's probably, gosh, maybe 100,000 people recording high-resolution audio. And yet you look at almost any high-resolution audio website or catalog, and the selection is tiny. I mean, we've got a vast amount of content that nobody is distributing at all until it gets decimated. And I think that there's got to be something to try to start looking at the whole concept of user-generated content in particular. You know, maybe something like iTracks, you know, could start thinking about, gosh, somebody has a PCM 96 or a PCM 88.1 user-generated content. Maybe we should start sharing that in some way.
I think Apple's going to offer high resolution downloads.
Keep up with the changes in the demographics, you have to keep up with the changes in the physics, and what people are actually going to. Why do they go to Apple stores?
Right.
Why do I want to go to the local stereo hi-fi dealer, pay a lot of cash to this guy, and get treated like I do most of the time? And doesn't have a product, can't tell me the difference between his products, or help me choose between them. I mean, this is a story I've been hearing for year after year after year from all you guys. You're thinking in the same frame. You gotta get out of your own sandbox. You got bigger and bigger pieces of metal with fancier and fancier things on them.
Why don't some manufacturers set up a system at Amoeba Records?
What?
Well, right.
Why doesn't some manufacturers go to Amoeba Records and say, let us set up a really big stereo system and let the kids that come in here hear a real stereo system? Why not do that at the Apple store, maybe?
Every local guy that you turn.
Gentleman in the green shirt. Yeah.
Wasn't the local dealer, you know, but you go out to the local school, it's like the junior highs.
Exactly. The
And,
music department.
when
That's
I
right.
went to school, you had classes on music.
Yep.
Okay, you learned about music. I learned about music from my parents. I started playing the piano at 5 years old. My dad got a high-end stereo, I don't know, 14, 15 years old, and I've been buying high-end gear like Grell since then.
Actually, Tim, you have something
It's hard to do.
to add, yeah.
Well, yes, that's part of the answer, and it's not the whole answer, but part of it is to reach larger groups of young people, and that's going to be primarily, I think, in academic settings or entertainment settings. But Peter very kindly mentioned this earlier. We have 1,500 students at our school. We have a music listening library that was created by people who, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, listened to music at their professors' homes on fine equipment, remembered it, became audiophiles themselves, and then went on when my wife and I tried to raise money for this fantastic facility. 300 of them contributed quite a bit of money, and then the industry, many people in the industry, and it started in forums like this. Supported it. They were encouraging, which was nice at the time. Of our 1,500 students, most of them will travel through our facility. Many of them come back all the time. We have XLFs in the big room. We have air equipment. We have a new Bricasti DAC that is absolutely fantastic. I'm telling you, it's just fantastic. We have 2 turntables. Students love to spin vinyl. In another room, we have 2 more turntables. We provide them vinyl to spin. That's the vinyl that is not the precious vinyl. We take care of the precious vinyl. But I'm not joking, you know, they love it. They're enormously enthusiastic about it. They spread the word. They're buying Mr. Hall. They're buying turntables. so that they can spin their own vinyl. There's a way for the industry to reach some of these institutions like mine, not with not with, you don't have to buy the equipment, encourage it, or as you suggested, drop by and talk to the students about it. It can happen.
Why don't you elaborate on your 1 for 3 concept and your ultimate goal of getting back?
Well, that's fairness. They want to play their own music. They're not going to play MP3. It's not allowed. They're just listen. But they can play their music if it's vinyl or CDs or high resolution downloads that we check out first, and we will allow them to play one of theirs if they play 3 of ours. And that's the deal. It doesn't quite work out that way, but we plan the events in advance. The students have their own programs. It's really fun. It's advertised around campus. It's on a library website, and lots of people show up, and lots of manufacturers get their equipment, shown to young students who will become audiophiles. I'm convinced many of them will. That's not the answer, but that's part of the answer to find the larger venues.
Right. Yes, gentleman, Dr. Green.
I think it's an awesome idea. That you're nailing it. Alan, you nailed it as well earlier. I've been involved in the luxury car industry for 23 years. There are people out there that buy these vehicles simply because they can. They don't care. There are other people that buy them that are truly aficionados. I'm going to be giving a talk tomorrow morning at 9:30 in this room, and we're going to nail, this is one of the primary topics. How do we attract these people? One thing we say in the car business, a demo is worth 1,000 words. I can explain to you all afternoon how wonderful the new Lexus GS is to drive. What would the best thing be to do?
Let me drive it.
Exactly. Give you a couple of tips, toss you the keys. Let's go for a drive. How do you do that? One of the ways is what he's doing. I DJ part-time just for fun. My neighborhood, just around. I've even done it in some homes. Charge anything for it. It's just a lot of fun, okay? Every single time in the last 5 years, every time I've done it, 2 things have happened. Number 1, people come up and say, your music is so clear. That's what they say. It's so clear. It sounds so good. And then they look down and they go, you're playing records. How come? I said, well, you just answered your own question. The second point is, 90% of those people, and my wife will verify this, 90%, guess what? Females. Lastly, the 20-somethings go nuts. I had this happen over Labor Day weekend. The 20s and 30-somethings came over, started going through my collection. Oh, this is so cool. Oh, you got to play this. Oh, here, play this. It went on for 2 more hours than I was scheduled to spin music for. She left. She said, I'm out of here. I was having a blast with 20-somethings and 30-somethings. They're all over.
Hand-to-hand combat, that's what it's
right.
about.
Absolutely.
Hand-to-hand combat. And the same on the internet when you read these idiots on these websites saying, any speaker worth $50 doesn't make any difference. And MP3s are good. One at a time, I go on there and I challenge them. And what am I doing?
So
It's crazy, but hand-to-hand combat.
One of them, can you get good sound out of an iPod? Yeah. Okay, that might sound like a sacrilege in here because I'm a vinyl guy. But you can. I had my iPod connected to my system in one event that I did last December. I had 3 guys come up and say, here, try this. I said, okay, give me here, plug it in. They all said, how come your iPod sounds so dang good and ours sounds so crappy? I said, come here, let me talk to you about that. How'd you download that? Well, I just dragged and dropped it. That's your problem.
I think...
And they go, oh, get them involved, you got a demo.
I think that if I can say 2 quick things from this. First of all, if we had 50 more guys like you... But, well, 500. If 50 would be good. 2 would be good. But going back to what you said about DJing, I think a few of us here have been involved. There's a little movement that started in the UK, I think called Classic Album Sundays. Yeah, with a a lady called Colleen Cosmo Murphy.
Tomorrow, I have that in my presentation.
It's
an awesome website.
It's a fantastic thing. It works really well. She has this kind of Annette Bening thing going on, which helps as well. But alongside that, all that she does is she essentially takes a top room of a bar, a pub in the UK, one Sunday a month, and plays a record, just one vinyl record from beginning to end. The rules are she'll talk over it, she'll give the background to it, she'll give the early part of the talk, and then she'll play it, but she asks people, first of all, turn off your phones. Don't distract yourselves. Listen to it, enjoy it, respect the recording, listen to the music as a piece of music. It works, it's an amazing communal thing. It tends to work better with records that have a beginning, a middle, and an end, rather than just a greatest hits.
She's doing it in Brooklyn too. She's doing
Yeah,
it in Brooklyn
yeah.
right now.
It's a fantastic event. I did a similar thing in London's Royal Festival Hall last year. There was a thing called a Vintage Festival, which is a celebration of Englishness from 1950 to 1980. It was marking the 50th anniversary of the opening of the Royal Festival Hall, and we had this top large glass bowl top room, which was given over to being the best of British on the best of British. And we played a classic album from the 60s, 70s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, one a day, one of each per day, on a very expensive, moderately expensive high-end system made of UK equipment. And we must have played that to probably about 400 or 500 people over the course of the weekend. It was a sweaty glass box, the worst possible environment to play things. In the middle of July, people were paying, I think, £50 to go to this event, so it was $80, $90 to go to this whole event. And there were people staying there for the whole damn day, listening to everything, listening to obviously there'd be a Beatles album in the 60s, but they'd listen to Beatles, Pink Floyd, Joy Division, whatever it was, and they'd listen to these things. And we'd tell them the same thing, switch off the phones, do all this, and they were captivated by it. And people came up and said, I'd forgotten how good this is. Kids coming up who were dragged in by their parents, going, sit and listen to this, turn your phone off. And the strange thing is getting somebody under the age of 40 to turn their phone off. It's like saying, could you please, I don't know, murder somebody for it? Because I'm
afraid we have to wrap up now. We've overrun the time.
Sorry.
Just two last remarks. The first thing that all of us should remember whenever we start getting defensive about audio is that whatever comes along, whether it's a download, a server, or an iPod, they're all sources, and they all need an amp and speakers. All I'm saying is, why must that amp and speakers be some crappy little dock? That's what we tend to forget. Let's not get into the argument that an iPod is worse than a server is better than vinyl. Forget that. They still have to go through an amp and speakers. Just make it the best amp and speakers you can afford, because whatever the source is, it's going to sound better if the rest is better. So that is a crucial thing to remember. But the last thing that we've got to remember, and this is to turn you all militant, to become audio Taliban, like this gentleman here, get a bit violent. If you know anyone with huge disposable income who claims to love music, and they've got a superb car, fantastic shoes, phenomenal kitchen, and a Bose Wave, say to them, why don't you respect your ears as much as you respect your feet? Thank you very much. And thanks to our wonderful panel who took their time out to do this. Thank you.